edition of the Diplomacy Festival. This morning, we have the honor to have with us Alessandro Righi, an independent journalist. He will talk about himself, about his work, and then you'll have the opportunity to ask him some questions. So give a round of applause. Thank you.
Good morning. Hi, as she said, my name is Alessandro Righi. I'm an independent journalist. I'm an investigative journalist. I was born here in Rome in 1975. I'm Italian, but I've been a long time abroad. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to tell you a little bit of information about myself, so that I can introduce like how I got to do what I do today. Like I said, I was born here. When I was 7, my family moved to Congo, Zaire it was called at the time. Now it's called RDC, DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. I first was introduced, to television over there, and we only had like 1 or 2 channels, mostly kung fu movies. Every now and then there was a message from the president, Mr. Mobutu, Kukungbendu Wasabanga, which loosely translates into the warrior who goes from conquest to conquest, leaving fire in his wake. And that he did. I was there for about 10 years, and then there was, at the time we had what was called the Cold War. Mobutu used to get about $1 billion a year from the United States and other countries to fight the communists in Angola. So after the fall of the Berlin Wall, he stopped receiving this money and his government collapsed. So there was a big uprising and looting and pillaging and everything, and I left. It was about, I think, 1991. Came back to Rome. I finished high school here at the American Overseas School of Rome. And then I went to study abroad. I went to New York City, where I got my BA in journalism at NYU, New York University. After I was done there, I was naive enough to come back here, because I figured, I know languages, I can come back and easily find a job in Italy, and it wasn't so easy at all. I spent about a year running around to all of the newspapers here and televisions and everything, bringing my CV, but nobody ever answered. So finally, I found a job in this Japanese newspaper called the Yomiuri Shimbun Tokyo, which had a correspondence bureau here in near Via Veneto. And I started working there as I was more of a researcher and an assistant rather than a journalist. I was there for about, I think, 7 or 8 years. And finally, I started writing, for their English edition, which is called the Daily Yomiuri. So after that, since I was really interested in investigative journalism, together with a few friends of mine, we set up this production company, and we decided to produce investigative documentaries. So that's when I really started to do what I do today. Now I'm going to explain a little bit how it works, how an investigative documentary is produced. And I work for foreign networks, mostly. I've worked for Rai as well and Sky here in Italy, but I've worked a lot with Al Jazeera English. I've done stuff for other networks outside, for Arte, for Reuters, but mostly I've worked with Al Jazeera. And I'm not a correspondent of Al Jazeera, because I saw some of the pamphlets advertising the festival said I was a correspondent. I'm not. I'm an independent journalist. So what I do is I produce an investigative documentary and I sell it to them, but I don't work for them on a stable basis. So how does it work? What I do is I look for news. I look for a story first. It might be a story that, investigative journalism is mostly about crime, okay? So if you want to do this, you'll end up having, to deal with a lot of organized crime, You know, and here in Italy we have a lot of that because we have the Mafia, Cosa Nostra, we have the 'Ndrangheta, Camorra, and all of those. There's plenty of that. So you'll find a story that maybe hasn't been, you know, fully uncovered, or there are some certain sides of it that are still obscure. And you start doing research. So how do you do research on that kind of stuff? Well, first of all, you read the media, the newspapers, and watch everything about the story. And then you go out and try to get court documents, usually. You know, so you can get court documents if there's an ongoing trial, if there's an investigation, you can go to the lawyers that are involved, you can go to the magistrates, you can go to the people who are involved in the trial if they're willing to give you this kind of stuff. And you have to do a lot of research, so you'll be spending, you know, especially nights in front of the computer, because for some reason during the day it's very hard to concentrate on thousands of pages of stuff with, you know, a lot of names, and so you'll end up spending nights in front of the computer, jotting down all the names, addresses, companies, you know, and doing. So you need to learn to use the web very, very well if you want to get more information than the other guys, because that's what it's about. When you're going to pitch the story to a network, you need to have something more than the other guys. Because that's the only way you'll get it approved, because they have their own people doing, you know, the regular stuff. So if you come up with something more, then they'll be willing to give you a shot. So there are a lot of tools on the web nowadays to find stuff about people, you know, and especially the social networks. You can find a lot of people on social networks. There's, I don't know, the Wayback Machine, where you can find websites that don't exist anymore. You know, it takes snapshots of the web, and if somebody had a website, or some company had a website that's not there anymore, you can find it there. There are, you know, Whois. It's this service that will tell you who a website is registered in the name of. So you can use that. There's a lot of ways. So you gather all of this information. And you start to write proposals. So what you do is you have to figure out where you want to pitch your story. So there's plenty of networks out there, and depending on what your story is about, you have to find a program in some network that may be able to run your story. So once you identify the head of the program in that network, you start to make initial contact with them and tell them, look, I want to pitch some stories to you. I have these ideas. Are you interested? And then they will say, usually they'll say no, but you know, if you try hard enough and enough times, then you'll end up finding somebody who will say, yeah, this sounds interesting. Why don't you develop it? So then you have to develop the story. So what's development? Development is you start to, well, some of them will give you funding for development, others won't. So you'll have to put your own money sometimes into developing these stories. So you start to dig deeper into the story. You start to make phone calls, talk to people. A lot of people are not going to be willing to talk, especially if they're doing illegal stuff and, you know, you want to expose what they're doing, of course. And you start to write, you know, a longer version of what was your initial proposal, you know. And from one person, from one source, you'll go to the next source and you'll get more and more information up until the time when you actually find something that will convince the person, the head of the program, to approve your story and to ask you for a budget. And you don't always find that, you know, scoop or that piece of information that will make your story particular. But that's what you have to try to find, you know, something that will really convince them that, yeah, this guy is, you know, is the right guy to do the story. So once you have that, you know, you're good, because you'll send it to them and they'll tell you, okay, let's do this story. You know, you got such slot, you know, so you have to give us I don't know, a 26-minute story, a 50-minute story, a 3-part series, whatever. Develop it into that. So Once you have that, you have to draft a budget, and that's the boring part about producing stuff and not only being a journalist working for somebody or being a correspondent is that you actually have to do the production part, which, you have to figure out how much money it's going to cost to put together the story. So what you'll need is yourself. Of course, you're going to have to get paid because, or else why are you doing all this? You'll need filmmakers or a filmmaker at least. You'll need equipment. You'll need an editor. You'll need a sound designer, graphic designer, all of that. So you put all of that into your budget and say, this is what I need. This is the amount of money I need to produce this story. And then, you'll have to, of course, discuss with the head of programs and the other guys in the network, whether that's too much money or, if they can give you more, whatever. Once the budget is approved, then the fun part starts. Because you have your money, you can hire your people, you can get a filmmaker to come with you, you can get your equipment, and then you start going out there, okay? So in the case of, if you're dealing with a criminal organization, I don't know, the last documentary I did for Al Jazeera was about money laundering. And there was this guy in Calabria who was recorded on the telephone. He was talking about billions, moving billions. And the authorities couldn't really understand. I mean, where is this money? What is this money all about? So, of course, that person, you're going to have to talk to him. So what do you do? In my case, he accepted to be interviewed, but many times they don't. So when you start making telephone calls, what you do is, of course, you have to qualify yourself first and say, I'm a journalist, because you don't want to be, misinterpreted or look like some guy who's just asking them about their business, So you'll say, I'm a journalist. I want to talk about this. Are you willing to be interviewed on camera? Okay, because you're not recording a podcast. You're doing a documentary, so you're going to need images to go with the interviews. A lot of times they will just say no, because people don't like to appear on camera, especially if it's something about money laundering or something about crime or that kind of stuff, they'd rather not. But sometimes you can talk them into believing that it may be useful for them. It's not so simple. You have to get into a little bit into human psychology, and make them think, look, this thing is going to come out anyway. Somebody else is going to talk about this, so why not talk to me? My opinion is this, and be a little bit accommodating sometimes. So what you do is you start to go out and shoot your interviews, and then you have to shoot all the establishing shots and the B-roll and everything that goes with it, because, like I said, you're going to need images to go with, with the story. Once you have all of that, you put all of that together, and at the same time, you'll be writing the story. So you're going to have to transcribe mostly everything that you record, which will be hours and hours of stuff that you're never going to use, but you're going to need bits and pieces from that to put together a narration and a story. So you start writing, you write it all down, and then once you have all of your material, and when you go out there, of course, if you're doing investigative stuff, like I said, a lot of people aren't going to want to talk to you. So you're going to have to use a little bit of some hidden cameras, record telephone calls, all of that. Of course, you have to make a distinction between, somebody who may be a criminal or a public figure, so that, a public figure, usually their right to a privacy is a little bit more limited than that of a regular Joe or a victim of crime, So you have to make that distinction. Of course, you don't go out to a regular person and record them without saying anything and just air it. That wouldn't be correct. So you have to be careful, because when you bring that to the network, you're going to have to go through legal at one point, and some lawyer is going to be reading the whole script with you, and he's going to say, you know, why'd you record this guy? I mean, what's, you know, so you have to think about that beforehand and get talent releases signed by all of the people you interviewed. If you don't have talent releases for the people you interviewed, you're going to have to justify that. Because like I said, legal is going to be a real pain in the ass. They're going to come and ask you about backup documents for everything. Oh, you say this. Do you have something to back this up? You know, because they don't want to get sued, especially if they air in the UK or the US. You know, the UK especially, I mean, London is like a libel capital of the world, as I understand. And they will sue you for anything. So if you can, you know, make it past a UK lawyer, then it's pretty much good for the rest of the world. But so you come back to the network with your story, with a written, you know, version of the developed story, and they will say, okay, you sit down with an editor in an editing room for weeks on end, and you put all the pieces together. Okay, so you're gonna, at one point, you're gonna have a rough cut of the story. What's called a rough cut, it's, you know, it's pretty much your documentary, but without all the, you know, cool, aesthetically pleasing parts. But it basically tells the whole story. You send that back to them, and they will say, you know, oh, we like this, we don't like this, you know, get rid of that, and, you know, they'll adjust it in some way. The head of the programs will make it fit, because every program has its own style, has its own strand, so you need to fit into that. It's not like you're doing something, unless you're doing a completely independent production, then you can do whatever you want, but you're probably not going to get paid. Okay, so once you have your rough cut approved and you go through legal, then you go back to the editing room and you want to get a fine cut. So you start to put in all of your aesthetically pleasing images, like your drones. Everybody wants drones nowadays. If you don't have a drone, you can't sell anything. I don't know why, but it's something that you have to have. So I learned how to pilot a drone, and I do my own drones. It's kind of fun too. But anyways, so once you have your final cut, you send that back to them, and they'll tell you, okay, it's gonna air on such and such date. And you finally get paid. So, and then what happens once it airs? We're talking about criminal organizations. We're talking about people who don't want you to talk about them. So a lot of these people are going to be mad with you because, you know, you either recorded them surreptitiously and without saying anything, and you're airing telephone calls where these people didn't know they were being recorded. A lot of people are going to get really mad. But most of the time, they won't do anything because, I mean, these are criminals. So they don't want to, you know, get further notice or step into the spotlight even more. So usually they'll just not do anything. Sometimes they might sue you, or they might sue the network, or they might put a bomb in your car, stuff like that. Fortunately, that's not happened to me yet. So that's pretty much how it works. That's how an independent investigative documentary is produced. Okay. So I don't know. Do you have questions, or you want me to go on? I'm kind of.
Yeah. Now, if you have any question, you can just raise your hand. Since it's the first day, I remember to you that you have to say your name, that you are a GG2, that for you the translation is that you are second-year students, and the country where you are from. So you just have to raise your hand and the microphone will come to you. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for being here today. I'm Ghalia Ababne, I'm Jordanian, and I'm a GG2. I have two questions for you, if you don't mind. The first one being, we have seen the repeated pattern of propaganda from the West regarding conflicts and the justifications of conflicts. With the current context of the genocide that's going on in the Middle East, do you have any advice on how we could tell what is a dead giveaway for propaganda-driven journalism? And my second question is, as a journalist who has worked with Al Jazeera from the past, like as you stated, and currently I assume, What do you think that the implications of Israel banning journalists from Al Jazeera are?
Well, you know, journalists from Al Jazeera are always banned in some way or another out there. I guess my experience with that network is that they have been very objective and fair with me, because although I don't work stably for them, they've never told me you have to say this or you have to say that. You know, it's so. I think it's a very valuable voice to have a network from Qatar that's able to talk about that region from there. As far as propaganda goes, you know, every country in a way does propaganda because they have different views, they have different interests, and especially with the multiplication of the media nowadays, you know, it has there is an increased effect of propaganda. How to tell what's propaganda and what isn't? Well, you have to be educated. That's the only way you'll tell. If you know things, then you'll understand when something that you're being told is not true. If you don't, it's very hard to tell, because nowadays propaganda looks exactly like the real thing. That's why they do it. You know. I hope I answered your questions. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Adiola. I'm from India. I have two questions as well. First being, does your investigative journalism go beyond the boundaries of ethics to reveal the utter truth, ever?
Well, I hope not. I mean, I try not to. Well, the thing is this, if you're doing investigative journalism and you only speak to the people who are willing to speak to you, you're never going to get the real story out, okay? There are some people that you have to trick in some way. You can do it, like I said, if somebody is a criminal, you know, has done something wrong and you want to bring that out in the open, and then I think you have the right and the duty as a journalist to do that. But then you have to know where the line is that you don't have to cross. I mean, regular people have a right to their privacy. So recording regular people or making them say things that they didn't mean to say, or, you know, manipulating what their message is not right. And then you have to draw the line as a journalist. It's up to you. Because in the finished product, many times, the people who are going to evaluate and air the finished product, they don't know how things went when you actually met that person, or what else they said in the interview, because an interview is usually 2 hours long, and then maybe you'll use 3 or 4 minutes. So it's up to you to draw the line. And I think a lot of times people don't, well, for convenience sake, they don't draw the line, and they're willing to do anything to you know, to get the scoop, and that's also not right. But you know, it's very subjective. I mean, it depends on who you are, and I personally try. You know, I do my best to respect people's privacy, but then again, like I said, sometimes you have to go beyond that for certain people.
And I have another question. Has cultural or religious sensitivities ever been a barrier for you when you're doing your investigation?
Have ever been, I'm sorry?
Have ever been a barrier for you when you're doing your investigation?
Cultural or religious?
Sensitivities.
Well, yeah, I'm not a very religious guy, but you know, I respect everybody's opinions on that front. I think it's always a matter of understanding, you know, what's important for people, and and treating everybody's thoughts and interests and beliefs with respect. And once you do that, then you'll never be. It will never be a problem for you.
Is it work? Hello, my name is Stanislas. I'm from Switzerland. And my question is, have you ever felt threatened by any organization because you were investigating on them?
Well, not really. I mean, I've been threatened, in very subtle ways, because a lot of people will say, when you speak to them, if you say this, people are going to get mad, people are going to kill you, people are going to go after you. Yeah, I've been told that, but never in a very concrete way, like, finding my windows smashed or being beat up or stuff like that. Yeah, no, it's never been that bad so far.
Hi, I'm Alessandro Bevilacqua from GG2, and I'm from Italy. And I wanted to ask you about the fake news. How do you deal with fake news? Moreover, because we're living in a period in which we're getting a lot of fake news, and in case you are getting some fake news, you have maybe not enjoyable consequences. So how do you deal with it?
Well, yeah, you're right. Nowadays, a good part of the news that are out there are fake, or they're not completely real. Okay, there are those that are completely fake and those that aren't completely real, or only tell part of the story. And now with the artificial intelligence, I've noticed, especially like on Google News, for instance, you'll see a lot of articles that you can tell there wasn't a person, writing that, and it's just, paragraphs that have been thrown onto a page by some computer. There's a lot of that nowadays. How do you distinguish the fake news from the real news? Well, you have to cross-examine, in a way, the news, the sources of the news. You read something and then you read it somewhere else and try to read the same subject matter in a third place. And then, once you've read enough sources and you can find the bits and pieces that do coincide in several articles or media documentaries or whatever, but it's kind of hard to tell nowadays, and I think it will get even more complicated in the near future.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Maria Serrano. I'm GG2 and I'm from Italy. So my question is about personal experience. Which was the most interesting and or hardworking, of course, if they overlap, investigation that you have worked on?
Well, I think a number of years back, I wrote a book about this guy. His name is Wilson Raj Perumal. He's a Tamil Indian from Singapore, and he used to be a professional match fixer of football. And I think in a way that was the most interesting story that I came across, because I was shooting a documentary for Al Jazeera on match fixing, and I traveled to Singapore and met with one of his friends, and I got this guy Wilson, his email address. At the time, he was in prison in Finland because he had been arrested in Finland for match fixing, and we started corresponding about. We exchanged emails for about a year, and then I convinced him to write a book about his story, and he was then released and he moved to Hungary, and we met in Budapest tens of times to tell his entire story, and this guy was incredible. I mean, somebody who came from a very poor part of Singapore, and very interested in football, and he knew everything about football, but he was also a gambler, so he couldn't resist, and in order to be able to gamble, he would fix matches, and it was really startling the way that he would tell you about this, because he'd say, oh, you know, I'd just go up to the player and give him $10,000 and tell him, you know, get a goal scored on you. And it worked, because he did that for years, and he got a couple of teams qualified in South Africa World Cup by paying the other team to lose. And these guys used to bet millions on these matches through Chinese gambling platforms, illegal gambling platforms, and there was a whole world behind this, you know, apparently like simple thing, you know, you see, betting on football. I mean, and I think that was one of the most interesting stories that I was involved in.
Hello, my name is Devisha. I'm from India, and I wanted to know if you prefer or choose to be independent, because usually journalists working with news, I mean big news companies, are often driven by scopes and viewerships. So do you prefer being independent for that reason? And on the flip side, do you sometimes miss having the protection of a bigger label when suppose things go down?
Yes, I like to be independent, because of course I can choose the subject matter that I'm going to talk about, you know, and if you're not independent, then you might end up having to do a lot of stuff that you're not interested in. And the reason I do this job is because I am interested in things, you know, and I want to find out more about them. And so that's the good side of being independent. Of course, there's a downside, because you don't have a regular salary. You know, when you're done with one job, you have to go out there and find the next job, and you may not find it right away, so you're on your own. But I think it gives you a lot more freedom. And as far as protection goes, when you're working with networks, they will protect you while you're working with them. So there will be this last documentary that I shot, which was about Ndrangheta and money laundering. I was constantly in contact with my guy, with the head of the program that I was shooting this for, and I was uploading all the interviews on the cloud. And on that note, you know, I suggest whether you guys will become diplomats or journalists or whatever, you know, be very careful with your computers, and, you know, always try to have an encrypted drive, and use encrypted emails when you communicate with people, because nowadays there's a lot of people snooping around in your devices, and it's very easy nowadays. But yeah, I think it's worth it. But of course, you know, if you have a good job at a good network and they allow you to pitch the stories you like, then it may be better. I don't know, because I've never worked for one.
Hi, my name is Helen, and I'm from Zimbabwe. So I'm here.
Sorry, I hear the microphone from there.
Hi. Hi. So first of all, your job sounds insanely dangerous, and I was wondering, how do you ensure your personal security as well as your loved ones? And secondly, are there any law enforcement authority that follow up on the stories that you document? Thank you.
Okay. Well, as far as my safety, my personal safety goes, there's really nothing I can do about it, because if somebody wants to come after me, they can. I'm just a regular guy, you know, so. But like I said, once you go out and tell the story, there's really no reason for people to go after and kill you, you know, because the story has been told, the damage is done. If you have information and you keep it for yourself, then that makes it dangerous, because somebody may decide to shut you up before you go out and tell the story. So that's why I was saying, you know, when I was interviewing people for this story, I would upload everything so that the head of programs out there in Doha was aware of everything I was doing. So if they were to kill me, then, you know, he would have the story. So that's a way to protect yourself. And then what was the second question? I'm sorry. Well, it depends. If you have, you know, if you find out new stuff on a story, they will follow up. I have several contacts here in the law enforcement among the Carabinieri or Guardia di Finanza, and there's a lot of, we do exchange information. So yeah, they will use your information, and as an investigative journalist, you will have a lot of contacts in the law enforcement because you get information from them, you give information to them, and then they use it in their job as well.
Hello, my name is Jam. I'm from Turkey. I'm a Jiu-Jitsu student, and I have two questions. One of them is, actually, I think you already responded to that with Helen's question. My first question was, when reporting on a controversial issue, how do you remain neutral?
Okay. Well, I tend to say what I think. You know, you have to be balanced. You always have to be balanced as a journalist, but you do have opinions because everybody has their own opinion and everybody's opinion is different. So you don't have to be afraid of stating what you think. Of course, in journalism, in investigative journalism, what you say usually has to be backed up by facts, by evidence. So your opinion will transpire from your story, but it's mostly about facts. So if so-and-so stole this bottle of water and I have, you know, a video of him stealing it, you know, I will show that video, and then it's not a matter of opinion or not. And then if so-and-so was sentenced to 10 years in prison, then you might have an opinion of whether that was too harsh of a sentence or not, you know, and that's your opinion. But that's, I guess, a more marginal part of the story that you're going to tell.
And my second question was, because you told us that you studied, like reported on mafia issues in Italy, are you comfortable in like high pressure situations in which you witnessed maybe during your career?
Comfortable? No. No, I always hope that things can, you know, just play out nicely. I'm not a violent guy, you know. I don't like, you know, violent situations and stuff. I've seen them. I've been, you know, a witness of some. I don't like them, but sometimes they do happen.
Thank you, all the way to here. Okay. Hi, my name is Giulia Maria Redicchi. Hello, I'm from Italy. So the other day I was reading an article, I don't remember who was it from, and it basically said that people nowadays are used to war, or they're used to bad news, they're used to conflicts, to the point where they detach themselves from empathizing with the news that they read, because it would be too much to take in. And I was kind of thinking about it specifically also in the context that we are right now, and I think that is quite true. We are not able to take in all the bad information that is portrayed to us. So I wanted to ask you, what was your take on that? If you think that this is something you have to deal with when you, for example, choose the images that you put in a documentary, the type of videos. Are you gonna show a video of a family that was displaced from the place where they lived and moved somewhere else to tell the story? Or are you gonna show somebody that was injured? What kind of images do you choose in order to breach into this feeling of detachment that apparently people have nowadays? Thank you.
Yeah, I don't really, of course, if I have images that are, it's true that our sensibility has been a little bit, leveled down because we are exposed to so much videos and all of these, we see every little corner of the world nowadays. It wasn't so when I was a kid. You had television. There were no cell phones. Or so it was much different. But when I go and choose images, it depends on whether those images are functional to tell the story that I need to tell. If they are, I will not be afraid to use images that are harsh. If they aren't, I don't like to try to somehow make the story more have I don't think that harsh images can have a greater impact than the story itself. That's the bottom line. So yeah, I will use them if I need to use them to tell the story. Otherwise, I won't.
Hi, my name is Matteo Mazzantini and I'm a GG2 from Italy. And I wanted to ask if you had any takes on the noise war that is brought on by governments where they hide important sensible information behind the walls of mountains, we could say, of worthless news and infos that is useless and worthless to hide the real sensible information.
Well, governments hide a lot of information. They have to sometimes. Italy, of course, is a particular country in this sense because much of our story is. There was a guy, Ugo Yeti, his name is, and he apparently said that Italy has no memory of its past. Okay, so there's much of our history, especially the recent history of Italy from the 1950s, from the end of the Second World War up to now, that has been hidden from the people, the people of Italy, because there was a particular political situation as far as the Cold War is concerned, and with the fight against communism and the very harsh clash between the right wing and the left wing. Here in Italy, it's particularly harsh, or it's been in the past. So in order to have a certain kind of narration here that would fit the kind of government that we needed to have according to who our allies were, we were told only part of the story. Was that good or bad? I don't know. But yeah, sometimes, I mean, politics and politicians have a need to hide some of the information, because if you say everything, then you're going to have to say some things that are bad or some things that people won't agree with. So on the other side, journalists have the duty to go out and find that information and make as much of it available to the general public so that they are informed. So it's, there's usually a balance between what gets hidden, what gets found, and what people end up knowing. I don't know if that answers your question.
Morning. First of all, thank you for your speech.
Hello,
I am
thanks.
Cosimo Petralia from GG2. I'm from Italy. And I had two questions. So the first question is, which one, if there was one, was the most delusional case you had? And the second one is, have you ever regret to have taken this path?
What do you mean by delusional?
Delusionally, in the sense that you expected something based on first sort of information you find, and then you just found out it was totally not as it was supposed to be.
Well, it's happened several times. There was, well, in this last documentary that I shot, I was reading this informativa, which is like a note from the authorities, where there was telephone recordings of these guys, and they're talking about these money transfers abroad. And they're talking about one specific money transfer. And while I was doing research, I end up finding the same details with the same companies of this money transfer in a Ukrainian court paper. Okay, and there was the amount was completely like out of this earth. Okay, it was in the trillions. Okay, so I was left. I had these two pieces of information. These guys are talking about a money transfer. This money traces of this money transfers have been found in the house of a hacker in Kiev, but the amount was completely unbelievable. So I started working on this, and I ended up doing a three-piece investigation for Al Jazeera on this. But although I did in a way understand the mechanism that was at play, I never really managed to find out whether that was true or not. And I think that was basically the one story that I wished to find, and I didn't. And what was the other question? I'm sorry. No, I don't regret taking this path. I mean, so far. Thank you. No, I don't. There was never a story that I decided not to do because it was, you know, too dangerous or too risky. No, and my most controversial piece, I don't know. I've done documentaries about the Vatican Bank, or you know, they're all. Investigative journalism is not that controversial, okay? Because you're talking about crime, and you're going after criminals and saying, you know, this person did this. I'm going to explain to you how he did it. So it's not that controversial, you know. It's not like I'm commenting on religion or that kind, or politics or that kind of thing, you know. It's a lot simpler in reality.
Good morning, I'm Sara Orlis from Jiu-Jitsu. I'm from Italy.
Hello.
So you said that, like, you talked about the need for a journalist to look for an interesting detail to make maybe the story more, you know, captivating. So I was wondering, what is your relationship with the clickbait culture? Do you think it can be a positive tool in the sense that, like, it makes news spread very quickly, or you think it promotes the tendency not to look like at the big picture that maybe readers have?
Well, I have two kids, okay? One of them is 12 and the other is 14. And they're always flipping their telephone like this, you know, they're whether on TikTok or whatever, you know, and there is this huge amount of information that they go through, you know, in the span of a minute. You know, and it's very, very superficial information because it's just, you know, it's immediate. Everything has to be immediate and right there. You see it and it's gone and you move on. I think in a way it does take something away from having an in-depth knowledge of what something is about. And I think it also limits the ability of people to really concentrate on something for more than 10 seconds.
Hi, my name is Livia Bartolozzi and I'm a Jiu-Jitsu from Italy. What do you think about the fact that in Italy politicians might own the channels that also provide the spread of information? Can a democratic state that values the freedom of speech, the freedom of press, allow this clear contradiction, this conflict of interest? Thank you.
Well, we don't really have a choice, do we? Because they, I mean, Berlusconi isn't there anymore, so I guess that was the biggest case of a politician owning, about half of the information. But then again, do we want to limit the ownership of media outlets on the basis of what you do in your life? I mean, it would be better if there were, if a publisher was just a publisher, and if a newspaper was just a newspaper, and that it would, if it were owned by somebody who is really interested in having a newspaper and not just to use it as a club or a tool, to hit people over the head with it. But as a matter of fact, we don't really have a choice because people with money will be able to buy media. And if they don't own it, they can still buy journalists, they can buy politicians, they can buy, So I think we need to be well educated in order to be able to select the news that are real and be able to tell what is not fake, what is fake, and what is the things that are told to us for another reason. I mean, we need to understand where we're being tricked. So it's very important to just read up on everything, and get in-depth knowledge of everything, so that it doesn't matter who owns that media outlet, because if they say something that isn't true, you're not going to believe them.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Camila Sagifolo. I'm from Turkey. I'm GG2. And I have a question about how do you know if a story is worth pursuing?
Well, you don't. Initially, you don't. A lot of times, I spend maybe even months just reading up on stuff and reading all the court documents of a story. And then in the end, I just drop it because there's nothing, I can't find anything new about it, or I can't find any, real culprit in the story, or so you don't know it initially. You just kind of have to develop, a feeling for what could have, what could be hiding something else. And it's not so easy, but sometimes you get lucky.
And I have a second question. How do you know that your information is unique enough to actually publish it? And maybe if other people don't have the information, how do you know?
Well, nowadays you can find that out on the internet. I mean, you go online and see, whether that information is already out there. What's really lacking in today's journalism is people who go out and actually check whether an information is true or not. A lot of newspapers are just, copy paste from ANSA or Reuters or news agencies, and they don't go and ring the buzzer, they don't make the phone call, they don't talk to the people involved. If you go out and do that, and you ring the person's buzzer and you actually speak to them, then that information is most probably going to be something that only you have. Because a lot of people aren't doing that nowadays. Need a microphone?
Here. Hello, I'm Ilya Kaviani. I'm from Iran. And I had this question that what would happen if the person you interview wants to be anonymous, but at the same time it is likely that your news won't be qualified?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. It's the person that I interviewed?
Wants to be anonymous, unknown.
Okay.
Yeah, and what will happen to your news? I mean,
that's his right. A lot of people have asked me to say something but not be identified. So in this case, you can either, just not show their face. You either blur their face, or You know, you shoot them in a way that the face isn't seen. We do this often. You usually, of course, the information that the person gives, if you don't know who the person is, will probably be less specific. But of course, if somebody doesn't want to appear on camera, you can't force them to. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Mohammed. I'm a GG2 student from Nigeria. I have two questions for you. One, how do you manage fellow journalists in your line of work in the investigative part, whereby maybe you're on a story and there is a way, from where I come from, maybe a lower tier journalist will be trying to just hang on or hitchhike on your own investigation, and maybe if they are lucky, they get to the mother lode of the story before you, they may actually take credit for that in some cases. So how do you deal with that and go through it?
Well, it hasn't happened very often to me to be on the same story with somebody else at the same time, so that we go after the same people and you know, step on each other's feet. It's happened a few times. In that case, you just have to get there first and convince the people to speak to you, and then, you know. But if that doesn't happen, of course, there's nothing you can do about it.
So before a story is fully published, you have no copyright on that story or on that investigation that makes you the only authorized exclusive journalist to pursue that trade?
Yes, of course, of course.
Again. Building up on some of the points that you've made previously about data protection, with all the new upcoming spyware programs, such as Pegasus, for example, how can a journalist maintain data security, and what are the steps to be taken if you find out that that security has been breached? Okay,
I'm a little bit of a computer geek. Okay, I've been using Linux since the 90s. I never use Windows or Apple or Mac. I've used Red Hat, I've used FreeBSD, I've used Ubuntu, Fedora, and I usually, if I have to do something that's sensitive, I use a VPN, I use a virtual machine. There's a number of technological tools that you can use so that you protect yourself. Like I said, encrypted emails, encrypt your hard drive when you have a computer. I mean, you should do that by default. Just, you know, get everything encrypted. Why not? I mean, now there will be quantum computers that are coming up, and they'll be able to decrypt it anyways, but it's always a step that it's better that you take. You have to read up on that and learn the technological tools that can help you protect your information. And if you've been hacked, well then, you know, there's not much you can do about it. I mean, just wipe and get a new encrypted hard drive.
Hello again. One would assume that your work dictates a lot of travel, right? So have you ever felt stark differences in terms of mobility for a journalist in terms of freedom of press and censorship with all the different countries that you've traveled in?
There are a lot of, you know, a lot of the time when I travel, I don't say that I'm traveling because I'm a journalist. In some cases, you will ask for a journalist visa. But if you're doing an investigative story, it's better if you don't. I mean, you just travel, if you can, you travel as a tourist. And then as far as the countries that I've been to, I've never really had that much trouble. I mean, I did run into a little bit of trouble when I was in, I think it was in Guinea, Conakry, and we were covering the election, and we had this piece of paper from the government saying that we were journalists, And then in that case, I remember being stopped, a number of times and just being harassed, by the military there. But nothing really happened. But like I said, you may not want to say if you're going, for instance, to Singapore, which is a very controlled, country, there's cameras everywhere, and that you're going there to shoot a documentary about local match fixers. You just travel there as a tourist, and try not to show your camera around too much, and if they ask you, you're saying, yeah, I'm just doing this. I'm just shooting a video for my friends. Hi.
Hi, I am Ludovica from Italy, and thank you for your speech, first of all.
Thank you.
And you might have answered already to these questions, but I wanted to ask if you feel that to have a certain level of independence and freedom of speech, especially freedom of speech also in Italy, you need to be an independent journalist. So if the choice was dictated in a way also by this thing. And secondly, if you also within Italy, you have experienced some episodes of censorship in a way.
There's plenty of censorship here, but it depends on who you work for, because Italy is very much divided into political, groups. So if you work for Repubblica, you have to say that, immigration is good. If you work for Il Tempo, you have to say immigration is bad. And then when you speak to the people who actually work there, that may not be what they think, but this is how it works here in Italy. And then there are some media networks or newspapers that are more balanced than others. But it's very much politically, divided. Yeah, unfortunately. Yes.
Hi again. Khalia's question made me think about something, which is you were saying that you have to do a lot of learning and research before obviously producing a story. And I was wondering, when you do your research on the internet, and you also said that you need to know how to use the internet. How do you use the internet? For example, do you use softwares like Tor to go and research your information? Because, for example, on Google, we have a lot of information bubbles and targeted news, polarization, and that kind of prevents you from having an objective idea. So how do you do that?
Well, the Tor network is very particular. I mean, I have used it because there used to be a website on the dark web that had this whole huge database of all the court cases in the Eastern countries, including Russia and Ukraine and everything. Now it's not there anymore. They changed the address. I don't know. I can't find it anymore. But for regular information, Tor is not very useful because you can't search on Tor. You need to already know where things are. But it is useful if you don't want people to know that you're doing something. And it can be very useful in communications. So there are softwares or scripts that run all of your traffic through the Tor network. And it could be useful for if you want to communicate with somebody and you're afraid that somebody else may be eavesdropping, then you can use that, and it's very, very safe.
If nobody else have any further question, otherwise I thank a lot the speaker of today.
Thank you all. Thanks.
And actually, I'll leave the floor to Giorgio Bartolomucci.
Good morning and welcome at the Diplomacy Festival, the 14th edition. We are really delighted and very happy that the collaboration with Gigi and Professor Piga is continuing and that you will be spending the next week with us. Unfortunately, today we have a cancellation. The question time with the ambassador was supposed to be with the ambassador of Israel. And due to security reasons, till yesterday we were discussing with the Italian Questura, with the police, and with all the anti-terrorist enforcement, and they suggested not to have this event this morning. We appreciate their effort, the embassy effort. We want to, in a certain way, witness our sympathy, and also we wish that this situation will find a solution that would be not so dramatic as it seems, and we hope that we can maybe postpone the event with the ambassador that was really interested in coming to explain his position and to receive all the questions that you would have liked to do. In this question time, there are no limitation in terms of questions. You can ask whatever you like, because they know that they have no parachute. You can ask anything in a civil way, and if you do not agree with the politics of the country that they represent in Italy, we ask you to be on your position, but as you surely are polite in posing questions and not in condemning their policy. They are exposing themselves, they are coming here to receive their questions, and we would like this to be a forum and a space for exchanging, even in a very, let's say, very transparent and also very, sometimes hard way, but still in a civil way. So now, because we want to give to this cancellation a political and also a very important factor in the festival, because the war has obliged us to do this cancellation. We are not going to substitute the presentation. So you are invited to be back around 2:15. So you will have the next event that is a very interesting event that has to do with demography and the future of our societies. We do have here Professor Morland, that has been listening to the previous discussion. He is coming directly from London for this event. He will be joined by two demographists, and he will discuss. I may ask him to introduce in 2 minutes, Professor Morland, if you can introduce what will be the topic of today, so that they can be ready to listen to you. And after, you are free to explore this area that is a very old part of Rome. Maybe it's the oldest part of Rome, because this is the Jewish original area in Rome. And if you like to taste, they have splendid cakes. There are two little bakeries where they do the Jewish pastries. So, Professor Morland, I am just taking the advantage to have you here. If you want, just spend 5 minutes anticipating what will be your talk, please. Please, come here.
And not spend all afternoon eating kosher cakes. My name's Paul Morland. I'm a demographer. That means I study the big trends of population. I've written 3 books on the subject, and I'm publishing a 4th next year. And the basic theme of everything I do is that, just like economics or leadership or psychology, demography is a really important lens for understanding the world. So if you want to understand history, why the First World War happened, why it ended as it did, why Japan rose and fell as a great power, demography is not the only way of seeing this, but it's a really critical lens through which to see the world. And just as that's true of the past, I argue it's true of the future, the present and the future as it emerges. So what I'll be trying to get over this afternoon is the big trends in demography. It's not one thing after another. There's a process, there's a plan. The thing falls along or travels along set rails to try and explain what those rails are, what that format, what that framework is, and how it is actually unfolding in the world that we see around us, and to try and persuade you that without understanding demography, births, deaths, and migrations, you really can't understand anything about the world.
Will that do? That's okay. Thank you very much. Tomorrow we'll have the ambassador of Austria. Monday we will have the ambassador of Azerbaijan. And then maybe you already have the program and you can see yourself the next ambassadors. And we'll have a special evening that is on the 24th. You are invited at 7 o'clock in a cafe. It's a different format. We will have a question time with the ambassador of Germany that has just arrived in Rome, and he will be giving one of the first speech. But on the 24th, you will have the ambassador of the United States here. And that will be the first time he talks in public. So that's it. Thank you very much.